What if someone could control your thoughts without you even knowing? In the early 1950s, during the height of the Cold War, this wasn't just a theory. It was a growing fear inside the United States government. At the time, the world was divided between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Tensions were rising, and both sides were competing not only in weapons, but in intelligence and psychological warfare. In 1950, during the Korean War, American prisoners of war began returning home under unusual circumstances. Some had made false confessions. Others appeared to support their captors. To U.S. officials, this raised a disturbing question. Had these soldiers been brainwashed? By 1952, reports of so-called mind control techniques used by communist regimes had reached American intelligence agencies. The idea that thoughts, beliefs, and decisions could be manipulated was no longer dismissed as fiction. It was treated as a serious national threat. In April 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles officially approved a classified program to investigate these possibilities. The program was given a codename MKUltra. Its objective was clear but unsettling: to develop methods that could control human behavior, influence thoughts, and extract information against a person's will. The program was based primarily in the United States, but its activities would eventually spread across multiple locations, including universities, hospitals, and secret research facilities. The CIA began funding experiments through front organizations, often without revealing their involvement. One of the key areas of research focused on chemical substances. Scientists believed that certain drugs could alter perception, weaken resistance, and make the human mind more vulnerable. Among these substances, one stood out: LSD, or lysergic acid diethylamide. Discovered in 1938 and studied more widely in the 1940s, LSD was known for its powerful psychological effects. By the early 1950s, the CIA believed it could be used as a tool for interrogation and control. Initial experiments involved controlled environments, where volunteers were given small doses and observed closely. But as interest in the program grew, so did the scale of experimentation. Researchers began seeking faster and more extreme results. However, a critical boundary was crossed. In many cases, subjects were not informed. Individuals were exposed to drugs without their knowledge or consent. Some were patients in hospitals. Others were recruited under false pretenses. A few were simply unaware they had become part of a government experiment. By the mid-1950s, MKUltra had expanded into a complex network of secret projects, each one exploring different ways to manipulate the human mind. What began as a defensive response to a perceived threat was quickly evolving into something far more controversial. The pursuit of control was no longer just about protection. It was becoming an experiment with no clear limits. And as the program continued, the consequences would become far more serious than anyone had expected. What the CIA did next would remain hidden for decades. As MKUltra expanded throughout the mid-1950s, the experiments became more aggressive, more secretive, and far more dangerous. What began as controlled research quickly turned into something far beyond science. By 1955, the program had developed into a network of subprojects, each exploring different methods of manipulating the human mind. These experiments were not limited to one location. They spread across universities, hospitals, prisons, and secret facilities throughout the United States and Canada. Many of these institutions were unknowingly involved, receiving funding through front organizations that hid the CIA's role. One of the most disturbing aspects of MKUltra was how subjects were chosen. In many cases, there was no consent at all. Patients in psychiatric hospitals were used as test subjects. Prisoners were offered reduced sentences in exchange for participation. Others were simply targeted without their knowledge. Ordinary people, living normal lives, suddenly became part of a secret experiment they never agreed to. At the center of these experiments was LSD. The CIA believed it could weaken a person's mental defenses, making them more vulnerable to suggestion and control. Subjects were given the drug in controlled settings, but also in unpredictable situations. In some cases, individuals were dosed repeatedly over days or even weeks, pushing their minds to the edge. The effects were often severe: hallucinations, paranoia, loss of identity. Some subjects reported feeling detached from reality, unable to distinguish what was real and what was not. For the researchers, these reactions were not failures, they were data. But drugs were only one part of the program. Scientists began combining LSD with other techniques. Hypnosis was used in an attempt to implant suggestions into the mind. Electroshock therapy was applied at extreme levels, far beyond medical standards of the time. Sleep deprivation was used to weaken mental resistance, leaving subjects vulnerable and exhausted. In some cases, individuals were kept awake for days. In others, they were placed in isolation, cut off from all external contact. The goal was clear: break the mind down completely and then rebuild it in a controlled way. One of the most controversial operations involved secret safe houses set up in major cities, including San Francisco and New York. These locations appeared ordinary from the outside, but inside, they were carefully controlled environments. Individuals were brought in under false pretenses, often unaware they were part of an experiment. In these rooms, subjects were given drugs while being secretly observed through one-way mirrors. Their reactions were recorded in detail. Every movement, every word, every sign of psychological change was documented. To the researchers, this was valuable information. To the subjects, it was a violation they would never fully understand. As the program continued, the line between research and abuse became almost invisible. Some participants suffered long-term psychological damage. Others lost their ability to function normally. And in certain cases, the consequences were far more severe. One incident would later raise serious questions about how far MKUltra had gone. In 1953, a CIA scientist named Frank Olson was unknowingly given LSD during a meeting. In the days that followed, his mental state deteriorated rapidly. Just 9 days later, he fell from a hotel window in New York City. The official explanation was suicide, but many believed there was more to the story. The circumstances surrounding his death were never fully explained, and it became one of the most controversial cases linked to the program. Despite incidents like this, MKUltra continued. The funding increased, the experiments expanded, and the secrecy grew even deeper. Within the CIA, very few people knew the full extent of what was happening. Even those involved in the program often only understood their specific part, not the bigger picture. By the early 1960s, MKUltra had become one of the most complex and hidden operations in US intelligence history. It operated in silence, without oversight, without accountability, and without limits. But no secret can remain hidden forever. And eventually, the truth would begin to surface in ways no one expected. For nearly 2 decades, MKUltra remained hidden from the public. The experiments continued in secrecy, buried within classified files and protected by layers of intelligence operations. But in the early 1970s, something began to change. Questions were being asked, and for the first time, attention was turning toward the actions of intelligence agencies. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms made a critical decision. He ordered the destruction of MKUltra files. Thousands of documents were eliminated, permanently erasing large portions of the program's history. The intention was clear: whatever had happened was not meant to be discovered. But not everything was destroyed. In 1974, a major breakthrough came when journalist Seymour Hersh published an article revealing illegal activities conducted by the CIA inside the United States. This report shocked the public and triggered a wave of investigations. Soon after, the US government launched formal inquiries into intelligence operations. By 1975, the Church Committee and the Rockefeller Commission began investigating MKUltra and other secret programs. What they uncovered was disturbing. Evidence of human experimentation, lack of consent, and psychological abuse began to surface. The idea that the government had conducted such experiments on its own citizens caused widespread outrage. However, the investigation faced a major limitation. Most of the original MKUltra records had already been destroyed. Without full documentation, investigators could only piece together fragments of the truth. What was revealed was shocking, but it was clear that much more remained hidden.